Welcome, folks. This is your host, Prabal Gupta, and you are listening to The Capital Analyst. Our guest today is Sarthak Ahuja. Sarthak is a partner at Sandeep Ahuja and Company with 10 years of experience in tax advisory, startup consulting, deal advisory, and business modeling. At the age of 23, he probably became the youngest ever to become a CA, CS, and CMA while completing his bachelor's in finance from College of Business Studies, University of Delhi. He was a gold medalist in his MBA at Indian School of Business and was also the recipient of Directors Award and ISB Young Leaders Award. He runs his own YouTube channel with videos around financial planning, tax laws, startup consulting, and book recommendations, and has over 12,000 followers on his Instagram channel. Tune in to have an inciting discussion on being a CA in the new economy with Sarthak. Welcome to the show, Sarthak. How are you?
Thank you, Prabal. I'm very well, and thank you so much for the very kind and generous introduction.
So let's begin right away, Sarthak. So what I have observed is that there's sort of a black box around what CAs actually do. Like if you ask people, they would vaguely say things like accounting or saving taxes or something in that direction, but no one actually knows what exactly does the job of a CA entail. So can you start by throwing some light on that?
Sure. So I think if we were to start with what the CA curriculum teaches you, there's finance, of course, which includes corporate finance, not personal finance. There is tax planning, both direct and indirect. There is a lot of accounting. There is auditing, which is checking of accounts, and cost accounting, management accounting, which are all verticals in accounting. Essentially, basically, they teach you how do you analyze financial data better for decision making in any organization, which could be either to optimize costs or to optimize taxes, something of that regard, and possibly building maybe MIS platforms and reports so that the management can take a better decision. This is what they teach you, but of course, depending on people's interest and work exposure, CAs may choose to either get into only direct tax planning or only indirect tax consulting, or doing accounts outsourcing or auditing, which is a very big area, because every company which is registered needs to mandatorily get audited by a chartered accountant. So that, I think, is one area where almost every CA wants to kind of contribute in some way, because they also feel a sense of there's a license attached to their signature in audit. So yeah, those are the primary areas. But of course, if we talk about new age things, like what is really happening in today's time, so with a lot of globalization and what you would call globalized economy, in that there's a lot of transfer pricing. Like for example, uh, companies set up multinational organizations in different geographies and do transactions to be able to optimize tax and evade taxes. So a CA would need to then evaluate whether any such shenanigans are in place, where things are being routed through a particular entity solely for the purpose of avoiding taxes. And I think a great part of a lot of CA's earnings also comes from giving people legitimate ways, legal ways to kind of plan those taxes. So yeah, those are fun things. There's also forensic audit, where if you want to figure out what kind of frauds have happened, so diagnostic analysis on financial reports and financial data, which is new. There is now in Europe, there is the GDPR guidelines, which is General Data Protection Regulations. So CAs are also getting into GDPR audit. Then as part of startups, there's valuations, there's corporate law advisory as to what kind of instrument to use to raise funds, how to circumvent laws around it lawfully. So yes, that's your general domain.
Can you give an example of an interesting problem or case that you worked on in your practice that better illustrates one of these points that you talked about?
100%. So I think you know how almost people from every kind of function or academic background would agree that what you read in theory is a lot of times very different in what you really actually do at the workplace, which I think is one of the biggest gaps in the current education system, which a lot of new age edtech platforms and companies are trying to fill. Basically, skill people for actual tasks they will be doing at the workplace. Now, if you were to talk about things like, how would a startup value itself? If I were to pick any book on valuation, which is probably out of the many you can see behind me, there's also one mergers. There's another valuation I can see on the rack next to me. None of them actually tell you how startups are valued. There are some new age books from new people who are into all of this valuation, but they're picking maybe theoretical concepts from these old time concepts, but how it's done now is very, very different. So you need more than just having background knowledge. I think for any CEO or any professional, be it a medical professional, a tech professional, electronics engineer, they just need to be so updated with the number of changes in everyday life and in everyday business to be able to perform better. Which is why a simple example like startup fundraising, when I got into this domain about 5 years ago, where I got a startup founder coming to me saying, I want to raise funds. I had absolutely no literature in India to refer to even learn how to go about doing it. And I had to order books from the US and understand all of that from the how do VC deals really happen. Like there is this wonderful book called Venture Deals by Brad Feld, um, which tells you about VC term sheets, negotiate them, how to draft those agreements and contracts and navigate yourself through all of them. It was extremely surprising to see that there was nothing in India. Gradually identifying this gap, there is VC Circle by HT Media, which is trying to organize a lot of events and programs on venture capital terms and how valuations happen. And especially with the boom in the past 2-3 years, a lot of people have started finding content online through which to educate themselves, but still as part of like theoretical papers or academic books, a lot of this is not there. So I think a great deal of my learning really happened when I started working with startups. And so I come from a CA family where my parents are also CAs and they've been in practice for 35-40 years. And they feel, okay, if you were to ask them, okay, what kind of business models are there, they'll probably tell you there is retail, there is services, there is manufacturing. Okay, and then if you talk about important financial ratios, they'll tell you gross profit margin, net profit margin, so on and so forth. But in today's time, if there is e-commerce, and there's a marketplace model, and there's a SaaS model, and there's a transaction based model, and there's an enterprise sales model. So business models have really evolved and changed, and even financial metrics now are not limited to net profit. They're about linked to daily active users and gross merchandise, transaction value and whatnot. Which is why I think for a world of today, it becomes so much more important to just be learning every day and build a system in your life which ensures you are learning every day. So if I were to talk about my experience with startups fundraising, when I started about 5 years ago, I had a lot of learning, which was a lot of fun. I have audited for entities like WHO India, which has exposed me to the workings of international not-for-profit enterprises in India. And there it's called a propriety audit, because there is no tax compliance, nothing, because it doesn't apply to an organization like that. So essentially you need to put like a detective's lens to figure out, okay, where are leakages? How can I block them? And I believe a lot of those assignments have actually made me feel like I'm ACP Pradyuman from CID, because I need to figure out evidences to show that this employee is actually leading to a lot of leakage for the organization. So yeah, those have been fun projects. These days I get a lot of queries around setting up crypto hedge funds and setting up of DAOs. So it's just evolving with new questions every day, which are very interesting.
So my next question would be, Sarthak, that why is it so hard to become a CA in the first place?
So how they say that everything requires smart work and hard work. I feel if one were to look at the proportion of how much smart work and hard work is required for doing any particular thing, while of course smart work is necessary, there's a lot of hard work that goes into becoming a chartered accountant. And I think one, it's possibly because the sheer body of knowledge that one has to study across those 10 exclusive subjects. And you can't just choose to be like, I want to be an expert in these two subjects, which should qualify me to become a CA. Like, I only want to study direct tax and indirect tax. You will have to perform well in all of them. That's one. The second bit, I think the fear in people's minds about the course also adds to the to really crippling them in being able to like face it with strength and clear the exam. Um, I think a lot of it also comes from the fact that these days most CA students tend to believe that no, I really need to take coaching to become a CA. I think what that does is somehow in their mind it tells them that I cannot be a self learner. You know, when that happens, when you're so dependent on your teacher or professor to tell you that this question is important or this topic is important, then you're trying to depend on someone else feeding you information. I think some of that is definitely important from a strategy point of view, but if that becomes your entire go to gospel or bible for how I will crack my CA exams, I think you're placing the faith in other people's capabilities over your own. So I think if one could really crack that as a problem and figure out that yes, I really don't need to depend on other people's notes and teachers to kind of teach me and just focus on this, I think that'll really possibly maybe ease out the burden for children a lot more. Plus it will put them in the right mind frame to be able to keep learning even after qualifying, because that's what will really help them work.
Sure, great. Now that you talk about like this framework of learning as well as being good at examinations, I want to understand from your perspective, right from your college days to completing CA, CSCM, and even at ISB, you have already been at the forefront of being a great academic performer. So, do you feel that this is something which is an innate ability that some people just get things quickly and they are good at scoring marks and clearing examinations, or this is something that can be perfected over time, or that takes a lot of effort to build upon?
So I'll tell you honestly, I have never been a top academic performer. And I'll give you more context for it. So even the gold medal that I got at ISB was for all-round excellence. So I was balancing academics with a bunch of other things. That's why they gave it to me. There was another academic topper who got the gold medal. In my CA exams, while I passed all of my CA, CS and whatnot in the first attempt, but for a lot of these courses, I was lucky and blessed enough to have passed it right just at that 50 mark, where had I gotten 1 or 2 marks lesser, I would have completely flunked. Even back in college, I remember in undergrad, in the second and third terms, I had horrible marks. Like I had something close to about 60, and my parents were just horrified. I was also horrified. But of course, I found those subjects very difficult. But in the subsequent terms, I decided I'm going to take this learning in my own hands. I went to the library every day, would take a book back home, make notes from it, and then make my notes in a way that before the exam, just 2 days before the exam, I have this body of knowledge that I need to refer to, which will just completely prepare me for what is going to come. So I think one is the willingness to learn. I think that curiosity is essential. If you don't have it for a subject, then you need to have an equal measure a push or ability to work hard. So either it's your curiosity which is fueling you to kind of work towards something. If you don't have it for a particular subject, then it's your hard work which you can burn the oil and you can put in the hard work to kind of go through. So I think you need a mix of both. You can be born with maybe some talent in a few areas, but possibly not all. And as they say, so you've heard of like a, a, a jack of all trades, master of none. But I think it takes much more effort, to be a great jack of all trades, because in today's time and age, you can't say I'm only going to learn this and be in this field and forget everything else. You need to be able to pick up with equal pace in everything because the world is evolving so fast. So I think academics, even in today's time, is either fueled through your curiosity or through your hard work. There has to be both.
That sounds great. So now talking about curiosity, you have mentioned a lot about the importance of reading on your YouTube channel as well, and you keep giving us these good book recommendations. So I want to know about what role does reading play in one's professional career as well as in personal life, and is there anything called smart reading? Like the second part of my question would be, is there anything called smart reading?
Okay, so I'll start with reading. I think reading is a big part of my learning. So in the system that I've set up for myself for everyday learning, a big part is setting aside about 1 hour daily just to read newsletters and content related to subjects that I like and I'm curious about every day. So over the past 4 or 5 years, I must have subscribed to about 300 newsletters or subscriptions, which kept distilling down to, say, right now I may have about 30-40, which I know I have to read. So, but I have discovered those 30-40 bases my interest and my liking after having gone through 300-400 over a period of time. So that discovery has been there. Now, as a system, only so that I keep pushing myself to read on a consistent basis, and I'm not just reading when I like it. Every Sunday, I send out a newsletter which goes to anyone who's ever been a part of ISB in the MBA program. So every Sunday morning, they get a newsletter which has 3 of the favorite articles that I've read during the week. It could be anything from culinary to art to culture to literature to business to self-development to personal finance, anything at all. So anyone, regardless of your functional background, can enjoy those 3 articles. And that's because now I've built in that system and I have that pressure that I need to read enough every week so that I can find 3 gems that everyone would appreciate and learn something out of. So that's my system. So I have to, even if I don't have that shortlist, which is why that system is important. Now coming to various modes of learning. So you can learn through video, you can learn through audio, you can learn through books. So in the night, when I know I fall asleep if I'm reading, I prefer video so that I continue learning. If I'm driving, I'm in transit where I can't hold a book or read, then I listen to podcasts through audio learning. And during the day when I'm on my computer, so I have time slots set aside for online reading and books, which are either digital or even physical. Now, why I feel that reading has probably given me more to learn out of is because there are so many other distractions in audio and visual that I think when you read, even if think of when you read a storybook, your mind begins to visualize what is happening. So I feel you get more involved. It is more active rather than other forms of learning, which are more passive. So I think you grasp more when you read. And it's also my way to kind of keep training my attention span to be at something for a longer duration. So just to keep building that discipline in a world where everything is reels, everything is TikTok, everything is shorts, which is why I think it's important. So reading is absolutely essential. Coming to smart reading, earlier I was just obsessed with that I have to read a book from the preface to like the right word of the last word of the last chapter. If I haven't done it, I can't check it off because there is that moral responsibility. How can I say I've read this book when I haven't read the last 2 pages? So, but now I've realized that, and you would see this with a lot of books, basically there would be, say, 4 or 5 ideas at max, which are being explained with a lot of examples. And I think smart reading comes with when you increase the quantum of your reading. After a point, you're able to identify, okay, what idea I'm absolutely certain I know. So I want to move on to the next idea. So, which is why I think it's about taking takeaways. And when I make content, I try and fit some takeaway in less than 45 seconds or less than 1 minute. And I've realized that if I have to take on a new topic, I may possibly have to read 20 pages to take out just those 2 insights. So while other people who are consuming my content, I want to give just those insights, but I don't know how much they will be able to retain by just watching it once and appreciating, oh, great idea, in comparison to if I've read 20 pages over and over again about it and being able to extract that 40-second extract. So I think I also have that selfish interest in creating content, that it's pushing me to be a learner, and it's giving me so much more. So I think smart reading after a point is essential. Otherwise, you're just wasting time.
Makes sense.
But does
So,
that answer?
yeah, definitely. It does answer. And actually, I recently subscribed to your Sunday snippets as well. And I'm looking forward
You
to,
did?
I'm looking forward to read it. And I also leave a link in the description for the viewers to check it out.
Awesome.
So now let's talk about entrepreneurship. And by entrepreneurship, I don't mean setting up a startup. I mean a different kind of entrepreneurship, which is probably very underrated right now, which is a practicing chartered accountant. Now, if you look at the numbers, I recently crunched some numbers, and there are over 3 lakhs CS in India, and more than 40% of them are practicing chartered accountants, which is a kind of entrepreneurship. So I want to know, how did you decide to join your family firm after doing an MBA from ISB? What were the initial challenges you faced when starting your startup consulting and things like that?
Right. So I think pre-ISB or post my undergrad, when I was doing my CA, I think I kind of had blinkers on, where I was like, okay, I need to do this academic course and I need to do these courses and I'll learn something. I'll probably make something out of my career, where I did it. Soon, when I did realize that, the market is kind of saturated and I need to look for real problem areas where there are gaps in the market that I need to fill, I understood that there is a big need in the SME, like Bharat entrepreneur space, about good business consulting, which right now is not happening. So all your top companies would go to like a BCG, McKinsey, Kearney, or some such for consulting. All your SME businesses actually depend on their CAs. कि CAs आपसे discuss करेंगे, वो बताएंगे क्या करना है, and CA is like a therapist listening to all other business owners' problem and giving very generic, answers, which pretty much any person sitting with a drink in his hand can talk about business. I felt I kind of wanted to change that, and my deal was that, okay, now I'm not going to identify myself as a CA. I'm going to identify myself as a business consultant, but I want to help family-owned businesses or small entrepreneurs with insights that will help them scale up. So I could try and fill that gap. So I remember even when I went to ISB as part of my application, and even during the interview, so Ankur Variku took my interview for ISB, I remember, and he asked me that, do you really want to go back to your family practice, or why are you then doing your MBA? And I said, an MBA basically gives you two things. One, it gives you the brand, so you're getting branded by an institute, which gives you some sense of recognition in the market about your credibility, and second is the access to that network. So I said, I want access to that network where people are learning and they're the best in their industry, so that I get access to it, I get that body of knowledge, and then I can be like one medium to disseminate in the world. When it came to in the middle of the year to sit for placements and all that was happening, I think it took a great deal of courage for me to sign that form saying that I'm not going to sit for placements. And I decided I'm going to help everyone else in this batch right now in whatever capacity I can to upskill and to help them get better placements by kind of heading the volunteer and whatnot. I think soon after, when I came back to the practice, I started focusing on things like no code. So I would look at, okay, my the existing clients in the firm, in the family firm, where there are manufacturers and whatnot, and I would feel a lot of things they're doing very traditionally, or they're just looking at their accounting data from only Tally or the reports that a simple accounting software like Tally is generating. And I felt that it was really necessary for me to develop MIS which were customized to their particular business. So I started from that, which is a very CA thing. And then I started finding no code tools which we could easily build into different aspects of their business and increase efficiencies. So I think that's where it started. And again, a great deal of what I do is coming from learning, is coming from curiosity, is the base has come from the degree, but a great deal of what I'm doing is coming from other sources, which is why I feel that now the question comes, okay, you've identified a problem, you are creating content, or you've figured out some solutions. Now it's about scaling it up. So my focus right now is, okay, if right now we're solving this for specific entrepreneurs and generating value and possibly getting compensated for generating that value, now I would want to generate that value in at a much larger scale. So for scale, you either need tech or you need media. So I'm like, okay, let media be the platform through which I achieve some scale, where after a point we can start productizing all of this. One way to productize is possibly through cohort-based courses, easiest way to kind of start something. And then you can keep building onto it. So I think any person who's coming into becoming a CA now needs to think about a problem area which needs solving and whether it can be scaled also.
Got it. And you have talked a lot about the things entrepreneurs get wrong when they're setting up their startups, or when they're raising funds, or when they're managing their business. What are one or two key critical things that you have seen people get wrong again and again, and that is something that has a lot of repercussions for their business?
I think these days, with a lot of founders I meet, they all tend to feel that money is going to solve the problem. So the first thing is understanding, can you really also solve a problem without funding in the first place? Funding is going to help scale. It is not going to, like, making a minimum viable product. I think if I sit and I am educating a techie on what all no code tools he can use to just put together an MVP to pitch to investors, maybe build some traction, at that point I feel that this person is probably just attaching his success to being able to secure a certain amount of funding, because he's constantly feeling the pressure that if I'm an entrepreneur, somehow to prove to my friends and family that I'm successful, I need to raise some funds. So I think that is a very common occurrence which is coming about. So there needs to be a mindset change that you can be a Zerodha, you can be a bootstrapped company and reach that scale. So once people try and start understanding that you don't need funding right from the word go, and how can you solve that problem and scale it up without funding in a bootstrap fashion, I think that is one core question. Really, you can keep taking out problems in the business model from that and start plugging them. That's one part. Second is, I still feel a lot of founders from the best of institutes do not have their numbers, on their hand. Like, they don't know their numbers like the back of their hand, which is essential. So I help them build MIS statements which need to be updated in real time. So I think that is necessary. So they all know data is important, but if you were to ask them to compile their North Star metric, they'll be like, yes, I'll get back to you on it. And they'll probably work on it for 2 days, validate it and all of that and come back. Sorry, that's not how you can scale up. So I think it's primarily these two things: having data on a real-time basis on just one or two key metrics. And the second is knowing, as CA students would think, that मेरे को जब तक कोई ट्यूशन नहीं पढ़ाएगा, I can't pass. So self-learning, which is why जब तक मेरे को कोई funding नहीं देगा, maybe I can't be successful. That myth needs to really be busted.
That's great advice, Sarthak. So as a person who has been juggling on so many things and has been successful at all of them, do you actively monitor how do you spend 24 hours a day, or do you feel the way we define productivity is overhyped these days and you don't really need to be that conscious about these things?
So I think for people who've seen my Excel sheet, at times they just think I'm a psychopath or something. So I've had my phases where I'm not tracking that particular sheet right now, but I've tracked it for over a year, where every day, like, the amount of sugar consumption, the number of push-ups, the amount of exercise I've done, the number of steps I've done, the amount of reading I've done, the amount of learning I've done. Everything was getting tracked. But I think it was only to begin with till the time I realized it became a part of my being and it became a habit. So then I realized, okay, beyond a point, maybe I can stop tracking my sugar intake, or I can stop tracking, because it's become a part of me now. I just like food a particular way, or so that's when it stopped. But yes, I do track a lot. So everything is on my calendar. In fact, at times it's a little too much, because my parents are almost like कि तुमसे बात करने के लिए तो मतलब appointment लेनी पड़ती है. I feel really like embarrassed when they say that. So I'm like, okay, I need to cancel everything else and sit with them right now. So yes, I think it just gives me more control over my time. It helps me balance things out better. But of course, don't be crazy like that. Like, I think there has to be a healthy balance. Track something which you want to develop as a habit. Once it becomes a part of your identity, don't obsess over it, because then your habits will ensure it happens.
Got it. And how important do you think is personality development or networking or public speaking or communication when it comes to your professional career? The context in which I'm asking this is, like, in the past, jobs in finance or even job like C has been very technical, and it was kind of believed that if you get the numbers right, if you're good at what you do, you don't really need to focus on the other aspects of things. Is it changing right now? Do you feel in the new economy, the latter part will be much more valued than the technical part?
So great question. And this is something that Nassim Taleb had mentioned, that if I were to find a surgeon who looks really smart and very sophisticated to perform a surgery on me, and another who looks like a butcher, and both are at the same standard, in terms of skill, I would go with the one who looks like a butcher, because he would have put in so much extra effort to get to where he is today than the other guy, because the other person's personality would have kind of put him there faster. Which brings us to the point that personality, marketability, presentation, communication helps you scale. So till the time, till a few years ago, where technology wasn't mature enough to help you scale, and your CA practice was limited to the city that you're in or the place that you're living in. So you'd be like, okay, I'm the CA here. Anyone around my area, any business owner who needs CA services can easily find me, and he'll come and I'll be able to solve their problem. Now, when the world is your oyster, you realize that the more scale you have, economies of scale also come in services. You'll be able to provide more of that value to more number of people at lesser cost. So why not be more marketable? Which is why I think 2 years ago, I was speaking with someone from one of the Big Four, and I spoke to someone in their marketing team. And they've had marketing teams for a very long time, and branding team. And I was just hoping and thinking that, someday we should also have like someone focused on marketing, because I believe it's that important a function to help scale. So basically, during my MBA also, my specialization was strategy and leadership and marketing. I did not study any finance courses at ISB. So now we have a marketing team also, which I like to be a part of. So yes, I think it's important for scale.
Got it. And so you have already mentioned that one of the key problems that you encountered while starting up was lack of educational resources around this field of startup consulting. What are the other key problems that you faced when you decided to start this business, get clients, scale it, that you had not really anticipated, and that were kind of setbacks in this journey?
I think the HR aspect. In fact, just this morning while having my shower, it just occurred to me, and I was like, HR, how people make jokes on LinkedIn about HR just makes rangoli and HR does this. And today, when we're reading about the great resignation, and around the world, people are resigning from jobs and wanting to get into freelancing or making money from other avenues. That's where it really comes down to that. understanding, again, if you can understand your employees, I think where people say we're a customer focused, thing, I think uh, the organization's focus has to be, okay, customer is first, but employee is a very, very quick second, because basically it's your team, how they feel. Do they feel rewarded enough? Do they feel acknowledged enough? I think that's very important. So I think HR importance is also going to increase manyfold, especially with work from home, where people have lost that physical connect of being in the same premises, of building a bond. The responsibility of an HR focused person to constantly think of how to make people feel more acknowledged, have them contribute more, um, developing frameworks and systems around that, I think has become all the more important. And you know how they say that there's idea and there's execution. I think this is very hard to execute, and it is such an important issue. So HR is essential more than at any other time in the world.
That's really a great insight, Sarthak. So my next question would be that what has been your one key learning from CA and from MBA, and how have they been two different or complemented each other?
So I think CA as a course taught me the discipline, that persistence is key. So consistency and persistency wins over talent, luck, everything else. That's my takeaway from the CA course. And from the MBA, it is data is king. So I think before that, I would try and do things consistently, but I wouldn't track it despite being a numbers person. After my MBA, all of a sudden I realized the importance of putting a metric to everything and quantifying it, because that's when you really see progress and you can identify problems. The very basic learnings, but I think that's the base on which I'm kind of trying to build my life.
Great. Another question, Sarthak, would be that these days you hear a lot about financial planning and how being financially independent is so important. And there are a lot of books, a lot of YouTube videos, plenty of material to read. And I understand that every person has a different financial goal and objective. But I want to know your opinion on how do you look at financial planning, and what are some of the key things you keep in mind while deciding upon your investments?
Okay, so I think what really happens in financial planning or information around financial planning is you need to understand it's a cycle. So, when people say there's a chicken and egg problem, there is a cycle here which starts from you earning money. First is income. Then comes from that income, you subtract costs. Then whatever gets left is your savings, which you invest. All of your personal finance material and information is around this aspect around investing. But the most important elements of personal finance is upskilling, which increases your income, and the part about costs, about not letting your lifestyle expense like go higher as you start earning more. So being more minimalist as a person, or like keeping your costs low. And I think it takes great deal of active management to build more income, upskill. It takes a great deal of discipline to keep your costs of living low than it does to just put your money somewhere and see return coming. Which is why, as a popular concept, it's investments which is more popular. People like, where do I put my money? Because they don't want to focus on these two. If you're looking for say you have an investment which gives you say an 8% return, and you're looking for a 12% return, so you just finding that differential of 4%, people will break their heads over. But if you were to just maybe reduce your costs of living this month by say 10,000, that's given you much more return than that additional 4% on your 1 lakh of investment pool can possibly do. So I think people miss out on this active part of financial management or personal management, which is why from an investments point of view, my focus is very clear in my portfolio. Given my age, a great deal of it is going a lot of it which goes into the markets is going into passive funds only on a consistent basis as an SIP. So I really don't care if the markets are going up, down, whatever. I'm like, this pool is getting built, the market will take care of it. So quite honestly, my investment journey is in the entire month is just one day in the beginning of the month where I just transfer an amount to an index fund, and that is it. The entire month is then focused on upskilling and earning more and maybe consuming less during the month.
Great. Now, since we have already talked a lot about reading, I want to know what is your favorite book and some of your favorite newsletters that you would recommend others to read as well.
Books are so many, but quite honestly, I think Sapiens is something I thoroughly enjoyed. When I read it, it just kind of blew my mind, and I really, really enjoyed Sapiens. So that if you want to, I mean, we'll also talk about other genres today. So just yesterday, I gifted my best friend a copy of Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee, which is the Mahabharat. Like Mahabharat, it is Draupadi's perspective on it. I think it's a wonderful book. So I loved reading that at the time I did. I quite enjoyed reading the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I think it's a short read. I finished it recently. What else? Other of my favorite books. I think we should also talk about. So you mentioned newsletters. So I really enjoy reading this one newsletter, which is at publicpolicy.substack.com. So I have never studied public policy as a subject. So that's my only one source on learning about how to manage people and, governance and all of that. So, how I said that earlier people would obsess over professions. Then the world came to obsessing over B schools. So after B school comes maybe learning public policy as a course, which is why I think that's a great newsletter to be subscribed to. Apart from that, the easy ones are AJVC, which a lot of people for startups. I think it's a very basic one. But publicpolicy.substack. If you want to take this one, I have never recommended this on any other channel ever. So let this be exclusive to your podcast.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sarthak. So usually when you're trying to do something new, as you are, or taking on some challenges or making a mark for yourself, you always look for some kind of inspiration. So I want to know who has been your mentor or your inspiration in this new journey that you have undertaken post your MBA.
So I think my inspiration comes from. Okay, so this is something I was going to give like a more philosophical gentle answer, but I'll use specifics now. So there is this one gentleman called Dr. Vivek Bindra. I don't know if you know about him, if you looked him up. He has about 1.8 crore YouTube subscribers, and he's a motivational speaker and a business consultant, so to say. And his focus is on tier 2, tier 3 cities of India. So I remember initially when I watched or I came across his videos, I was just like a little baffled by the maybe the manner in which it was delivered, which did not really appeal to me as an audience. And I realized it wasn't targeted at me. Later, I wanted to understand, okay, what is, more than 1% of India's population is subscribed to him. So I wanted to understand, okay, what is the business model really? Like how much is he earning out of YouTube ads, or what is it? So I was so intrigued. I went to the MCA website. I downloaded all his company's financials. I started studying it. And I figured that YouTube ad revenue was not even 1% of his total revenue. Then I delved deeper into, okay, what is it really that he's doing? And I think at some point when I got to learn more about what he's actually doing, I got so inspired. I was like, this is the most kick-ass person like I have known in the past 10 years. And I think in that respect, it just, so also surprisingly, very recently, about a month ago, I got a call from someone from his team saying that we want to build a course and we would want you to be the professor for it. And the past 2 days, I was shooting at his office for a course for, say, again, people in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So yes, I think about 9-10 months ago, I was trying to understand his business model, and just yesterday I was at his office shooting this. So which was also in a way like quite inspiring. But yes, if you do find the chance, you should definitely look up the business model and find out more about what this person is doing. It's insane.
That's really interesting, Sarthak, and I would be looking forward to know more about this course when it drops out finally. Last question for today, Sarthak. So so let's say that it's the year 2011 and you're just about to graduate from College of Business Studies. With what all you know today, like what is an advice you would have given to your younger self at that point of time?
I think I would have put in better systems around learning. When I say systems around learning, you need to have cues, you need to have rewards, like a system of cue and reward on a daily basis to ensure that you're learning. So I think that would have been established sooner. A lot of data tracking, which is important, which I do now, would have started sooner. Yes, these two things.
Yeah. And finally, any advice for CA aspirants right now, especially that I think CA exams are about to begin next week. So anything for them?
Okay, so not for the people who are just taking those exams, but generally just believe in yourself more than you believe in your teacher. So yes, teachers are like pura matlab full shat pranam and naman to all of them. Genuinely, like I think I've learned a lot from my teachers. There's no denying it, but you need to have more confidence in your own abilities in life, because teachers are going to be with you till a particular time and handhold you across something, but you have to hold yourself and push yourself through all of life. So believe in yourself much more than you do.
That's great advice, Sarthak. Thanks a lot for your time, Sarthak. It has been a great conversation. Got to learn a lot. Got a very good list of recommendations that I would like to check out, and I would urge my viewers to check them out as well. Thanks a lot for your time, Sarthak. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you. Pleasure. Absolutely. 100%.
That's a wrap from our end, folks. See you on the next episode.